I discovered my girlfriend was cheating with my brother. I exposed them at my wedding. But the drama is far from over. I, 45 am, never imagined that I would be writing this, yet I feel compelled to do so. My wedding day last week was supposed to be the best day of my life. Instead, because of my own acts and the betrayal of my family, it became a nightmare. I'm not sure if I made the correct decision, and I'm still processing everything that transpired. This is the complete tale. I believed that the woman I was seeing 6 years ago was the love of my life. After almost 2 years of dating, I was thinking about popping the question. I believed that she, 32F, was all I could have ever wanted. Intelligent, attractive, and we appeared to have similar values. I happened to find some text messages on her phone one day. I swear I wasn't spying. I had seen them when she was in the shower and asked me to check something for her. She and my younger brother, 40M, exchanged messages. I initially believed it to be harmless family banter, but as I continued reading, my heart fell. Let's just say it was obvious they were more than just buddies because they were discussing getting together and how much they missed one another. As soon as she emerged from the shower, I confronted her. She initially tried to gaslight me into believing I was paranoid by denying it. She started crying though, when I showed her the messages. She and my brother have been having an affair for months, right in front of me, it turns out. I was heartbroken. The two people I trusted the most in the world had betrayed me in the worst way possible. Not only had my girlfriend cheated on me, but she had done it with my own brother. I told her to leave my life and immediately stopped our relationship. My brother attempted to defend it when I challenged him about it. Can you believe that he claimed they couldn't help their feelings after falling in love? As though somehow that made it okay. I told him I didn't want to see him ever again and that he was dead. My parents should be on my side, wouldn't they? False. They continued to urge me to forgive my brother, even though they were disappointed in him. They would say, "He's your brother. Family is the most important thing." In my opinion, loyalty and trust are the most crucial factors, and both my parents and brother have demonstrated that they are unaware of this. I broke up contact with everyone. I knew I couldn't have individuals like that in my life, even though it was difficult. I spent the following couple years concentrating on myself. In order to deal with the trust issues this whole mess had caused me, I began therapy, put myself into my work, and gradually began to reconstruct my life. Then I met my now wife, 39F, approximately 2 years ago. She was patient, kind and compassionate, unlike anyone I had ever encountered. She was aware of my background and my family's problems, but she never pressured me to get back in touch with them. I felt like I could trust someone again with her. The happiest moment of my life was when I proposed to her. I was thrilled to begin this new chapter as we began organizing our wedding. Naturally, neither my brother nor my parents were invited. They were no longer a part of my life, in my opinion. I did, however, inform my parents about the wedding, not because I wanted them to attend, but rather because I knew they would ultimately learn and I didn't want any trouble. I made it apparent that neither my brother nor they were welcomed. Of course, they tried to argue. My father gave me a family lecture and my mother sobbed, but I refused to back down. On the wedding day, everything went according to plan. I felt like I was finally receiving the happy ending I deserved. My wife looked stunning, and our friends were all there to support us. That is, until right before the ceremony started, my best man rushed up to me. "Your parents are here," he stated with a distressed expression. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach when they said, "And they brought your brother and his wife." Dare they? How dare they bring my brother, of all people, and arrive without invitation? I was enraged. They were supposedly unwilling to move, even after I told my best guy to tell them to leave. Barely able to control my rage, I called my father. I spat into the phone. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He said, "Son, it's your wedding day." As though that clarified everything. "We're your family. We should be here." With a trembling voice I stated, "I made it clear you weren't invited. Especially not him." 6 years have passed, my father countered. "Don't you think it's time to let bygones be bygones? Your brother is sorry for what he did. He's married now. His wife is pregnant. Can't we just be a family again?" What I was hearing was unbelievable. Did they honestly believe that all would be forgiven if they simply showed up? That I'd throw open my arms to them? I said, "Get out," in a strong, icy tone. "All of you, get out now, or I'll have security remove you." "Don't be dramatic," my dad said. "We're already here. Just let us stay for the ceremony, for your mother's sake if nothing else." I was on the verge of losing it all when my wife showed up. She could see how unhappy I was because she had overheard a portion of the talk. "What's going on?" she inquired, her expression displaying worry. I told her what was going on, thinking she would be as upset as I was. However, my wife, always the rational one, suggested a middle ground. She answered, "Let them stay for the ceremony. It's not worth causing a scene and ruining our day. We don't have to interact with them. After the ceremony, they can leave." I understood her argument, even though I didn't like it. I did not want a family fight to be the only memory of our wedding. I agreed against my better judgment. The ceremony proceeded according to schedule. I made an effort to concentrate on my wife, our vows, and our professed love for one another. However, I couldn't help but be hyper-aware of my family members seated in the back rows, my father sitting rigidly with a fake smile on his face, my mother wiping her eyes with a handkerchief, my brother appearing uneasy, and his wife clearly pregnant. I noticed my parents approaching us after the ceremony while everyone was chatting and praising us. I stiffened, braced for conflict. However, my best man stopped them before they could get to us and reminded them of the deal, which was that they would go following the ceremony. I observed their silent argument, my father appearing stern and my mother making frantic gestures. At last, my brother and his wife followed them as they turned and departed. With a sigh of relief, I believed that the worst was behind us. The speeches followed though. In his emotional toast, my best man expressed his happiness for us and our friendship. Other friends joined in, offering wishes and amusing anecdotes. I then made the decision to give my own spontaneous speech, driven by a combination of rage, champagne, and a desire for vengeance. I got to my feet and clinked my glass to get attention. With all eyes on me, the room went silent. We hadn't planned for me to give a speech, so I could see my wife giving me a questioning look and probably wondering what I was doing. To my brother, I murmured, maintaining my composure in spite of the rage that was building within me. There was a whisper in the audience. Those who were aware of my past relationship with my brother appeared perplexed, while those who were not likely found this to be a kind gesture. Adding, "My brother isn't here today. But I'd like to thank him all the same. You see, if it wasn't for him I might never have met my wife." I stopped, sipped my champagne and looked around the room. My brother and dad, who had been about to leave, had halted their journey. Their looks were a mix of fear and optimism as they stared at me. 6 years ago my brother did me a huge favor, I remarked, sarcasm leaking out of my voice. He showed me exactly the kind of person he is by having an affair with my girlfriend. Deathly silence fell in the room. I couldn't stop, even though I could see the discomfort and shock on people's faces. I was releasing years' worth of repressed hurt and rage. I went on. That betrayal taught me a lot. It taught me that the people you trust the most can hurt you the deepest. It taught me that family doesn't always mean loyalty or love. And most importantly, it set me on the path that led me to my wife. I noticed the worry in her eyes as I turned to face her. However, I was too far gone to turn back now. I said, "So thank you, brother," as I lifted my glass. Thank you for showing me what true betrayal looks like. Thank you for teaching me that blood isn't always thicker than water. And thank you for being such a monumental screw-up that it made me work on myself. Made me become a better person, a person worthy of someone as amazing as my wife. After emptying my glass, I placed it firmly on the table. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see my brother's wife staring at him in disgust and shock, my parents looking like they'd been slapped, and my brother, well, he couldn't even look up from the floor. "Oh, and Mom and Dad," I added, "thanks for showing up uninvited and bringing him along. It gave me the perfect opportunity to let everyone know exactly what kind of family I come from." I felt a weight lift as the door closed behind them, but it was quickly replaced by another one as I turned to face the stunned crowd of our wedding guests. My brother's wife practically dragged him out as they left, followed by my parents, my mother crying and my father red-faced with embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell. The hush was broken by my wife first, who gestured to the waiters and remarked, "I think we could all use another drink." Suddenly, the enchantment was broken. And conversation resumed, though I could hear whispers of my name everywhere in the room. With a look of disappointment and worry on her face, my wife drew me aside and questioned, "Was that really necessary?" I replied, "I'm sorry," as the adrenaline left my body. I couldn't let them get away with showing up like that, trying to play happy families after everything they've done. Squeezing my hand, she sighed and added, "I know what you mean, but this was meant to be our day. About us, our future, not about your past." She was obviously correct. In my rage, I had made our wedding about my family's turmoil rather than our love. I experienced a small remorse, but it was outweighed by the relief of finally getting my point over. I tried to refocus the conversation to more upbeat subjects, but I could tell that my outburst had clouded the event. The remainder of the reception was a bit of a haze, with people approaching me repeatedly, some expressing support and others obviously uncomfortable. I didn't really realize the consequences of what I had done until later that evening, when my wife and I were by ourselves in our hotel room. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed and whispered, "I'm so sorry, I ruined our wedding day." "You didn't ruin it," my wife remarked quietly as she sat next to me and took my hand in hers. "It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that's what matters." I exclaimed, "How did I get so lucky to find you?" As I gazed at her, amazed by her forgiveness and understanding. She said, "I love you and I'm on your side, always," with a smile that quickly changed to a serious face. "But what you did today, it's going to have consequences. Are you ready for that?" she said. I gave a hesitant nod. "I believe so," I murmured. "We'll deal with whatever comes up together, right?" she said, "Always," and leaned in to give me a kiss. I couldn't help but wonder what those repercussions might be as we went to bed that night. I had publicly humiliated my family and exposed our private issues to the world, and while I felt justified because they had invited themselves, I was also concerned about the fallout. How would this impact my wife, who had been nothing but supportive, but I knew this wasn't what she'd agreed to when she decided to marry me. Would my brother's marriage survive this revelation? Would my parents ever talk to me again? I silently promised myself and my wife as I fell asleep that I would confront whatever came next, stop avoiding my history, stop allowing my family's behavior to dictate my life and start thinking about our future, mine and my wife's. I had no idea that the drama would continue for weeks to come, with surprises and confrontations I never expected, but that's a tale for another day. For the time being, I'm left wondering, did I make the right decision? Did I sink to their level, or was it okay to publicly shame my family? And most importantly, how do I proceed from here? Thank you for reading this far. I feel like I'm at a crossroads and I'm not sure which path to go, so I would appreciate any thoughts or ideas. First update. Life threw me another curveball a week after the wedding disaster, just when I thought things may settle down. I know this is out of the blue, but I need to talk to you in person, if possible. There are things I need to know, and I think you're the only one who can give me honest answers, said my brother's wife, 35F, in a trembling voice when she called me yesterday. Incredulous, I frantically tried to think of what she may want to discuss, and then it dawned on me: the wedding, my speech, and the disclosure of my brother's affair. As soon as I hung up, I went to locate my wife, who was working on some files in our home office, and she realized something was wrong after seeing my face. I told her I would consider it and get back to her. I told her what was going on, half expecting her to instruct me to keep my mouth shut, but my wife, as usual, took me by surprise. "I think you should meet with her," she remarked after giving it some thought. "You see, we can't change what's already done. However, your brother's wife is innocent in all of this. She is now enmeshed in a tangle that she did not cause. Don't you think you should give her some closure if you can?" She was correct, and even though I wanted to forget about it, I couldn't deny that my actions at the wedding had probably completely upended this woman's life. And she was pregnant, for crying out loud, and that the stress of it all couldn't be good for her or the unborn child. My wife agreed to accompany me for support, so I called my brother's wife back and set up a meeting for the following day at a quiet cafe. My heart sank when I saw my brother's wife enter. She looked exhausted and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed as if she had been crying. She must have been in her third trimester, and as she drew nearer, I could see that her pregnancy was even farther along than I had thought. This made me feel guilty once more. As she slid into the chair across from us, she said, "Thank you for meeting me. I need to know everything, from the beginning. I need to understand what happened between your brother and your ex-girlfriend. When it started, how long it went on. Everything." I inhaled deeply before telling her everything. How I had discovered the messages on my ex's phone. How I had confronted them both. How they had attempted to defend it by claiming to have fallen in love. How my parents had urged me to forgive them, and how I had severed all contacts with them. I kept a close eye on her expression while I spoke. She continued to be largely unresponsive, but I could see the anguish in her eyes and the faint quiver of her bottom lip. She was silent for a while after I was done, then she said, "Are you certain? Are you positive that it was him?" "Yes," I muttered. "I apologize, but I'm positive." Her hand instinctively moved to rest on her big belly as she nodded softly. "It was all a misunderstanding," he informed me. "Because you were attracted to his girlfriend and found it hard to believe she had chosen him. You severed relations with the family for that reason." Anger shot through me. He had lied to her, of course. Why had I anticipated a different outcome? I repeated, "I apologize," as I was at a loss for words. She gave a headshake. Avoid becoming. You are not to blame. I'm at a loss on what to do. A baby is due in a few weeks. How can I possibly believe him? With someone who could do this, how can I raise a child? My wife gently raised her voice. I have no simple solutions. You're not alone though, and I want you to know that. We are here to help if you need it in any form. My brother's spouse gazed at her with an expression of surprise. Why? You're not even familiar with me. The simple response from my wife was, because it's the right thing to do. And regardless of what has transpired between the adults, that baby is family. With a wave of pride and affection for my wife, I nodded in accord. Of course, she was correct. My brother's child, my niece or nephew, shouldn't be affected by any problems I had with him. With passion choking her voice, my brother's wife responded, thank you. As of right now, I have no idea what I will do. However, it means a lot to know that I have support. We continued our conversation, exchanging contact details and forming provisional plans to keep in touch. She was about to depart when she stopped and gave me a serious look. She remarked, I can see why you did what you did at the wedding. I understand, but I'm not saying that was right. I am, in a sense, appreciative. At least I now understand the reality. We were both deep in thought on the way home. My wife finally raised her voice. Are you all right? She inquired. I let out a sigh. I'm not sure. I feel bad for hurting her. However, I'm also relieved that the truth has come to light. Is that really so bad of me? My spouse gave a headshake. It's a human. The entire scenario is complex and disorganized. There are no unambiguous right or wrong responses. Of course, she was correct. However, I couldn't get rid of the impression that this was only the beginning. The truth was now known to my brother's wife. But how would she use that knowledge? Would she go up to my brother? Drop him? What about the infant? I became aware that what I had done at the wedding had started a series of uncontrollable occurrences. My brother's wife and their unborn child were the first innocent people caught in the crossfire, and that was all I could do at this point. I looked to my wife as we walked into our house. I said, I appreciate you being here and helping me through this whole thing. She gave me a gentle kiss while grinning. Never, she answered. Remember that we are a team. I nodded, appreciating her steadfast assistance. At least I knew I wouldn't have to face it alone, no matter what happened next. But I couldn't stop thinking as I lay in bed that night, unable to fall asleep. What would happen tomorrow, and how many more lives would be impacted by the truth I had let loose? Second update. Since my last report 2 weeks ago, a lot has happened in the scenario. Even though I'm still processing everything, I feel obligated to tell you what has transpired. As I previously stated, my brother's wife contacted me in an attempt to get the truth about the events that transpired between my brother and my ex-girlfriend 6 years prior. I told her everything when we first met. To put it mildly, the talk was challenging. She contacted me again a week later, her voice emotional and tremulous. She said, "Can we get together again? I don't know who else to turn to, and I need to talk to someone." The following day, my wife and I met her at the same cafe. I was astonished by her appearance. I was concerned because she appeared even more worn out than previously, with pale skin and black circles under her eyes, especially considering how far along she was in her pregnancy. She began speaking as soon as she took a seat. With trembling hands she added, "I confronted him. I asked him to be honest with me, and I told him what you told me." In the hopes that my brother had finally made up his mind, I held my breath. Naturally though, that was too much to ask for. She went on, her voice hardly audible above a whisper. "He denied everything. He accused you of lying, claiming that you've always envied him, and attempting to destroy his life. He even implied that you might be the one who had the affair and that you're blaming him for it." I was furious, but my wife quietly pleaded with me to let my brother's wife finish. With tears in her eyes, she looked up at me and whispered, "I didn't believe him. I wanted to, but he seemed to be reading from a script based on his reaction. And he became irate when I asked him for specifics. He has never before become upset with me. I realized then that you were being honest." Although I was glad that she trusted me, I was sad for her and her unborn kid. "What will you do?" my wife inquired softly. I had seen that my brother's wife frequently made this action when she was under stress. Her hand moved to her belly. "I'm not sure," she said. "I just don't see how I can stay with him, and I've been thinking about it constantly." I tried to sound objective as I inquired, "Are you thinking about getting a divorce?" Slowly, she nodded. "I believe I must. Someone who can easily lie to me and to everyone else around him is not someone I can trust, and I cannot raise a child with them. How would that set an example for our child? I was unable to refute her reasoning. I was impressed by her strength, if nothing else. My wife asked if you had spoken to a lawyer. The wife of my brother shook her head. Not just yet. Before I did that, I wanted to make sure. To be sure I wasn't overreacting, I suppose I wanted to speak with you first. I told her, you're not overreacting. My brother's actions constitute a grave betrayal of trust. Furthermore, it speaks something about his character that he is still lying about it today. She wiped away a tear and nodded. I understand. I simply never imagined that I would find myself in this situation, considering divorce while pregnant. It has the plot of a lousy movie. Squeezing her hand, my wife extended her arm. She said, you're not alone in this. We are here to support you in whatever you choose to do. I gave a nod of assent. Yes, without a doubt. And not only for you, but also for the unborn child. Regardless of what transpires between you and my brother, that child is part of our family. We spoke about her alternatives for the next hour. In order to understand her rights, particularly with regard to custody of the child, my wife advised that she speak with an attorney. I offered to assist her in locating a qualified therapist, who could assist her in processing her feelings and making rational decisions. My brother's wife appeared calmer and more focused as our meeting came to a conclusion. She remarked, I believe I know what I need to do. I need to do what's best for me and my baby, even though it won't be easy. We bid her farewell with hugs and vowed to keep in touch. I experienced a range of feelings as we watched her leave, including relief that the truth was known, pity for her suffering, and rage at my brother. My wife broke the stillness on the way home. Are you aware that this isn't finished? When your parents and brother learn that she is thinking about getting a divorce, they will respond. I let out a sigh. I understand. To be honest, I'm trying not to think about it. We have to be ready, she added. They may attempt to hold you accountable for this. Are you prepared for that? I considered it for a while. I reached out to hold my wife's hand and said, we'll face whatever comes up together, right? She gave my hand a squeeze. Never, she answered. I couldn't get rid of the sensation that we were about to experience something significant as soon as we drew into our driveway. My parents would surely have something to say regarding my brother's wife's divorce proceedings. The wife of my brother was contemplating a divorce. Without a doubt, my parents would become involved. And me, I was at the center of everything. But I felt like I was on the right side of things for the first time in years. With my wife by my side and the assurance that we were doing morally, I was prepared to confront the truth, no matter what came next. For the first time in a long time, I felt strong. Nevertheless, I couldn't help but ponder what the consequences might be as I laid in bed that night. What would my brother think if he found out that his wife was actually thinking about leaving him? Whose side would my parents choose this time? Time will tell, I suppose. However, I am certain of one thing. I will not allow the truth to be suppressed once more. Not now. Third update. Since my last update, which was a month ago, things have drastically changed. The decision to file for divorce has been made by my brother's wife. Last week, she informed me over the phone in a steady, resolute voice. She remarked, I've given it a lot of thought. I've spoken with a therapist and a lawyer. After everything that has transpired, I am unable to remain in this marriage. I was concerned about her future, but I was also happy that she was advocating for herself. She interrupted me when I voiced my worries about her raising the child by herself. I'm positive, she stated confidently. I would rather handle this alone than bring up my child in a home where lies are the norm. Both of us are worthy of better. She is currently living with her parents after moving out. My brother will shortly receive the divorce papers. My father called me out of the blue 2 days after that call. This was the first time we had spoken since the wedding. He sounded exhausted as he said, Son, we need to talk. Your sibling is in disarray. He claims that you're responsible for everything and that you have been telling his wife falsehoods. I could feel my temper building. Dad, those aren't lies. You are aware of what he did. You've known all along. After a long silence, my father's emotionally charged voice came back. I understand. I should have handled things differently back then. As should your mother. We were wrong to insist that you pardon him. I was taken aback. Neither of my parents had ever acknowledged their mistakes before. My brother wasn't managing the situation well, my father continued. He has been drinking a lot, my dad stated. He came to our house and said that you had destroyed his life. To try to resolve everything, your mother wants to call a family meeting, he continued. Would you think about attending? I felt conflicted. I had a part that wanted to say no, to stop the family drama. Another aspect, though, seemed odd. I had assumed it had died years ago. Finally, I said, I'll give it some thought, but I'm not promising anything. I shared both chats with my wife after the call. After paying close attention, she questioned, what are you going to do? I gave a headshake. I'm not sure. A part of me wants to simply get rid of everything. She concluded for me, but another part wants to go to the family meeting. I gave a nod. She believed I should go, which surprised me. She remarked, this has been looming over your head for 6 years. Perhaps this is your opportunity to finally face it directly and put it to rest. What if it simply exacerbates the situation? I inquired. She answered, then at least you'll know you tried. And I'll be right there with you no matter what. That's the current situation. The wife of my brother is submitting a divorce petition. My sibling is going downhill. Additionally, I'm thinking of attending a family gathering that might either mend or reopen old scars. I have no idea what will occur. A part of me is afraid to face my family and all the hurt and rage that have been brewing for years. However, I also have a hopeful side. Perhaps that's a bold phrase, but I feel like my family has a chance for true honesty for the first time in years. I am confident that my wife will back me no matter what. And I know that by sticking to the truth, however difficult it may be, I'm doing the right thing. If I choose to attend the family gathering, I'm not sure if I'll provide another update. However, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone who has read these updates and provided guidance and support. Although it has been a challenging path, it has been so much easier to know that I am not alone. Good luck to me. I suspect that I will require it. Am I the asshole for cutting ties with my dad after years of being blamed for my mom's death and refusing to pay his rent? Since the day I was born, my life has been challenging. You see, my mother died in the hospital while giving birth to me. After that, I was raised by my father, who somehow held me, a physical baby, responsible for his wife's premature passing. Not a day went by during my upbringing in our home without my dad reminding me, in his own cruel manner, that I was the reason my mother disappeared. He would never stop telling me that he never truly wanted me and that my birth had taken away the person he loved the most. He would remind me that I had to work hard and live up to the enormous price my life had paid. If not, my mother's passing would have been pointless. Hearing those cruel remarks as a child was terrible, as you may understand. I was too young to completely comprehend the intricacies of wrath, sorrow, and sadness. I also needed my mother, but she was no longer with me, and the only parent I had left acted as though I were the issue. Instead of protecting me, guiding me, and providing me with comfort, my father became the one who never stopped reminding me that I was not welcome in his life and that my very presence was a curse. It was quite challenging to grow up in that setting. I frequently felt bad just for breathing and existing. At times, I longed to speak with him and express how wounded I was by his remarks and how they made me feel as though I didn't belong, even in my own house. But I didn't speak because of fear. I was greeted with greater resentment and rage the few times I tried to speak up. The outcome was a childhood characterized by a strong feeling of isolation and loneliness. I felt like I was always on edge, trying to prevent my dad from being even more resentful of me, while other children had parents that supported them, consoled them when they were depressed and made them feel comfortable. The existence of so much resentment and hate toward that aspect of myself that I couldn't alter, the mere fact that I was alive, was just as painful as the absence of love. I made an effort to comprehend my dad's suffering in spite of everything. I was aware that Dad had been devastated by the loss of my mother and that he had never really recovered. However, that didn't make it any simpler to live with the consequences of his statements. As a young child, I was attempting to figure out where I belonged in a world that frequently seemed unfriendly and chilly. I still secretly yearned for his acceptance, love and approval in spite of all the hurt. Despite everything, I always hoped to somehow make my dad proud. Every time I brought home a report card with decent scores, I recall the excitement I felt, hoping that perhaps this time would be different. Excited to show him what I had done, I would approach him in the hopes of receiving a grin or a supportive remark, anything that would give me the impression that I was enough in his eyes. However, it was always the same. He would groan, hardly look at my grades, and advise me to keep working harder at my studies because they were still not good enough. He would argue that it wasn't a huge deal because hundreds of other children could receive the grades I did. I was greeted with disinterest and a continual reminder that I wasn't living up to his standards rather than pride or satisfaction. For him, no matter how good I performed, it was never enough. I was affected by his disapproval in areas other than academics. Every time I wanted to engage in extracurricular activities with my friends or play sports, he would quickly put an end to it. I was informed that my studies were the only thing I needed to concentrate on in order to leave his house as quickly as possible. I was reminded by those hurtful remarks that I was not a child to be cherished and cared for, but rather a burden. I didn't have the same parental support as my peers, who would talk about how their parents pushed them to pursue their interests and cherish their youth. I was always reminded that I was only a visitor to his home and that I had to follow instructions or face expulsion. The weekends, which ought to have been spent unwinding or enjoying friends, were no exception. Even if all I wanted to do was go to the park or hang out at a friend's house, he would go on a tirade about how I was squandering his money if I ever asked to go out or spend time with my friends. He'd start a tirade about how hard he was working to pay for my education and how I had no right to squander time or money on friendships. It seemed like he instinctively judged anything that made me happy or gave me a sense of normalcy to be trivial or undesirable. His reaction to my 15th birthday stands out as one of the most agonizing memories I have. For me, it was a day of dread, yet most children anticipate their birthdays with joy, organizing parties or get-togethers with friends. He disliked me celebrating my birthdays every year, but I believed that year would be different. I wanted to get some pizza and watch a movie with my pals. He had a fuss when I eventually plucked up the nerve to approach him for money. He yelled at me, saying that since it was also the day my mother died, I had no right to enjoy the occasion. He made it plain to me that I should never even consider having a good time on my birthday since it would always be the worst day of the year for him. I never celebrated with my pals because of this. As you might guess, I eventually learned from all of these recurring situations that my dad obviously detested me and didn't want me around. I felt like I was always walking on thin ice, trying to avoid doing anything that would make him angry or disapprove, as a result of the incessant rejection and criticism. I gradually discovered how to keep my aspirations to myself. I knew it would only result in disappointment and hurt, so I stopped looking to him for encouragement or acceptance. In order to get out of my dad's house, I put all of my effort into achieving good marks and did my best to be strong for myself. I eventually saw the results of all the effort, tenacity, and resolve I put into my studies. I still recall the day I was accepted to a prestigious institution with a full scholarship. It was a mixture of pride and relief. At last, I was leaving the house, escaping my father's controlling influence and beginning a new phase of my life where I could live as I pleased. I felt as though a tremendous burden had been removed when I left home. I was genuinely free for the first time in my life. I had some of the best times of my life throughout those 4 years of college. It was a time of joy, progress, and self-discovery. I was able to experience all that had been out of my reach for so long and live like a typical young adult at last. Even though he made an effort to exert greater control over me from a distance, I stopped listening to my dad. I'd had enough of living under his rule. It was time for me to take charge of my life and create the life I want. Even with my newfound independence and the excitement of college life, I never lost sight of my objectives. I maintained my good marks because I was eager to take advantage of the chance I had worked so hard to obtain. However, I also made sure to have fun and take advantage of everything that college had to offer. I joined clubs, attended parties, made new friends, followed my interests, and at last began to live my life as I had always dreamed. I met Sheila, my girlfriend, about this time. One of the most amazing and surprising things that happened to me in college was meeting her. There was something about Sheila that captured my attention right away. We are both very similar in that we are driven, ambitious, and career-focused. Beyond that though, our deeper connection was what truly set our relationship apart. No one else ever understood me the way Sheila did. The fact that we can sit together for hours on end without having to talk to each other is one of my favorite things about her. She lets me lose myself in my thoughts, which is really uncommon in relationships. I never feel under pressure to be someone else when I'm with Sheila. Whether we are sitting side by side, content in our solitude, or discussing our aspirations and ambitions, we appreciate each other's presence. For the first time in my life, Sheila gave me the genuine sense that I didn't need to bear the shame I had been carrying around for so long. She was able to see straight through the misery I had been experiencing. Pain that had grown so pervasive in my life that I was virtually blind to its abnormality. Sheila emphasized how terribly incorrect it was for my father to hold me responsible for my mother's passing and how no child should have to deal with that. She urged me to go to therapy, which I had never given much thought to before. I didn't even know there was a method to break free from my dad's influence because his words were so embedded in my brain. One of the things that changed my life the most was going to therapy. At first, it was difficult since it required a lot of bravery and work to face the truth about my childhood, admit the trauma I had experienced and learn how to destroy the harmful ideas I had internalized. However, therapy let me see things that nothing else had. It made it clear to me how faulty my dad's reasoning was and how much I was worthy of better. I gradually came to understand that my dad's resentment and rage were his problems, not mine, and that I wasn't responsible for my mother's passing. I saw that my anger toward my dad increased as I began to recover. It seemed as though all of the bitterness I had been harboring was at last emerging. For years, I had been carrying the guilt he had placed on me while attempting to gain his favor and be the child he desired me to be. However, I was now coming to the realization that I had nothing to do with that and that he had unfairly and cruelly burdened me with his rage and anguish. I found it challenging to keep up any sort of contact with him during my time in college because of this rage. I rarely spoke with him, and when I did, it was tense and brief. I couldn't help but be resentful when I yelled at him, and I wasn't very patient when he tried to manipulate or be critical of me. I finally confronted him about everything at one point. It was a spontaneous outburst of repressed emotion and frustration rather than anything I had planned. I explained to him how his words and deeds had severely damaged my mental health throughout the years he had held me responsible for my mother's passing. And how I was determined to stop him from doing that to me. I made it plain that I was tired of being used as a scapegoat and that I was entitled to dignity and respect. If not, I would sever my relationship with him forever. This time he had nothing to say. I had thought that he would apologize, but he didn't refute what I had said either. I observed a shift in my dad's interactions with me following that talk. Every time he spoke to me, he seemed to attempt to be kinder and less severe. He seemed to be trying to change, to be more sensitive to my emotions. However, our relationship remained tense in spite of this. A minor change in behavior was not enough to undo years of suffering and animosity. Although I was grateful for his attempt, it would take more than that to mend the relationship. If it could be restored at all, given the harm he had caused. Even while my connection with my dad remained strained over the years, I no longer felt the same kind of shame or rage. I've gradually realized that although I can't alter the past, I can manage how I allow it to impact the future. Sheila's encouragement and support have undoubtedly been crucial to this journey, and I am immensely appreciative of her for assisting me in realizing my worth as a person deserving of respect, love and happiness. My dad recently married DEI, his lover. I chose to go to the modest private wedding with my girlfriend Sheila, in spite of everything that had transpired between us over the years. As they embarked on this new phase of their lives together, we wanted to offer our support and best wishes. I was pleased for my father and believed that he may improve as a result of getting married. But my dad called me a month after they were married, seeming desperate. He was having financial difficulties as a result of some bad financial decisions. He informed me that he was facing eviction after failing to pay his rent for the previous 6 months. He claimed that he couldn't discuss this with his wife since it would cause them to argue. He asked me if I could pay his rent right now. As soon as I heard this, I declined. Given our complex past, I didn't want to be used as a financial safety net, even if I had the resources to do so. I didn't want to create a situation where he could come to me for financial support if things went wrong because I've worked hard to create the life I have. However, I began to feel bad after discussing it with Sheila. I couldn't get rid of the thought that perhaps I was being too severe, that perhaps he really needed assistance, and that he was still my father in spite of everything. I then gave my dad a call back and suggested a middle ground. I informed him that since I lived alone in my house and had enough room for him and DEI, I would let them to remain with me temporarily even if I wasn't willing to pay his rent. Until they saved enough money to get back on their feet and locate a new place, I offered them they could stay at my house. Considering everything that had transpired between us in the past, it wasn't an easy decision, but I believed it was the right one. I made it apparent that this was only a short-term solution and that I wanted him to put in the effort to get back on his feet. After considering my offer for a while, my dad finally gave me a call and accepted the deal. He and DEI moved in with me in 2 weeks, and I prepared a guest room for them. For us all, the first month or two was a time of transition. I hadn't lived with my dad for years, and we had changed significantly since then. I was no longer the adolescent who had to put up with his remarks in silence. I had my own life, rituals, and habits as an adult. Unfortunately, his previous patterns quickly reappeared. As though nothing had changed, my dad began making remarks about my habits and manner of life, including how I spent my time, maintained the house, and even handled my daily tasks. He seemed to have something to say all the time. However, I had changed from who I was before. I wasn't going to give him that much control over me this time. Every time he began to criticize me or try to dictate how I lived my life, I would tell him to stop. I would make it plain that, particularly while residing under my roof, he had no right to criticize my decisions. I was forceful, but I wasn't impolite. I refused to let him tell me how I should live any longer. Naturally, his wife, Was not pleased with this. She said a few of times that I should respect my father. She would explain to me how much he had given up. Since I knew the truth about him and she obviously didn't know about half of the things he had done to me as a youngster, I would just shake my head. Although I respected my father, I wasn't going to let him control me or override my decisions. I wasn't going to repeat the cycle of sacrificing my happiness to satisfy my father, something I had done for far too long. Nevertheless, I would simply remain silent any time DEI made those comments because it wasn't my place to tell her the truth about my dad. There was no point in arguing about it. Although I was aware that cohabitation would be difficult, I thought that eventually we could all figure out how to get along without too much conflict. However, one evening after a particularly demanding workday, I returned home to discover my dad and his wife watching TV in the living room. The kitchen was overflowing with dishes, and the house was a complete disaster. Since I had frequently reminded my dad and his wife that they needed to do their fair share of the housework and that it was his day to clean, I questioned him about why he hadn't done it. "You know," Dad began in that tone that always made me tense, "you're a grown-up who I raised all by myself after your mother died. Asking me to perform additional work for you at this age should make you feel embarrassed. You're capable of doing the dishwashing yourself." Hearing such statements infuriated me so much that I retorted, "You know what's truly embarrassing? The fact that you were the one who pleaded with me to move in for free. And now you're sitting here on my couch, in my home, eating my food, watching my TV and giving me directions. This entire time, neither you nor your wife have offered me any assistance. You know what? You can just pack your bags and depart at any time if you don't feel like doing the dishes." My father simply looked at me, surprised by how strongly I had responded. For an instant I feared he may actually stand up and storm out of the tense quiet. But knowing that he had nowhere to go, I turned and left the room, slamming the kitchen door behind me as my heart raced with impatience and rage. When I came downstairs the following morning, DEI and I were by ourselves in the kitchen. It's likely that my dad left early for work. DEI asked if she could speak with me as I was ready to leave the kitchen. I decided to sit down and listen even though I wasn't totally sure what to anticipate. DEI looked serious as she started to explain to me how upset my dad was following our talk the night before. She claimed that given the amount of money he had allegedly spent to assist me in purchasing my home, I had no right to treat him in that manner. My dad hadn't provided me with any financial support since I left for college, so I was understandably shocked. I had saved hard for years to purchase this house with my own funds. The assertion that he had made a substantial contribution to my acquisition was wholly untrue. When I asked DEI what she meant, she clarified that my dad had told her that he had contributed to my property purchase by using some of his savings. It seemed almost funny to me that this was the story my dad had given her, and it was like a light bulb going out. DEI persisted in saying that I should be thankful for the assistance my dad had allegedly provided me before I could reply. She believed that since he was having financial difficulties, it was only right that I begin paying him back some of that money by housing them while they were living with me. She argued that since this was essentially my dad's house as well, it was the least I could do in light of the alleged financial sacrifices my dad had made for me. I couldn't help but giggle at DEI as I continued to stare at her face. I mean, I couldn't take it seriously because it was all so ridiculous. When I eventually stopped laughing, I told her the truth. My dad hadn't paid $1 and I was the real owner of the house. Her expression was priceless. She was obviously unaware that I was the owner of the house, and she must have been overcome with shame and rage. In response to her question about whether or not my dad had ever assisted me, I explained that he didn't even have enough money to cover his own rent, so how could he ever afford to buy my house? She didn't protest much after our conversation, so I assume she saw the truth too. Shortly thereafter though, she gathered her belongings and departed from my home that same day. Since it was none of my business, I didn't stop her. When my dad returned home later that night, he contacted DEI and asked her why her belongings were gone. He began blaming me for speaking out after he learned that I had told her the truth about who owned the house. He claimed that by disclosing the truth, I purposefully ruined his marriage and caused his wife discomfort. He claims that since he now felt inferior to me and that it was somehow my responsibility that he couldn't afford a house of his own, I ought to have been more understanding and allowed her to believe his lie. It was unbelievably frustrating. I made it clear to him that I was offering them my house in order to help them, and instead of receiving appreciation, I was being held responsible for their issues. My dad seemed to have forgotten that I owed him nothing and that he was the only one at fault in this situation. Even as an adult, he was attempting to use me as a scapegoat for something that wasn't my fault, as if all the years of him treating me like I was the issue had suddenly returned. He refused to listen though. He didn't see my point of view and demanded that I call DEI to apologize and make things right by lying, giving her the impression that he had assisted me in some way when I bought this place. I said that I would not tell his wife a falsehood on his behalf. The continual manipulation and finger-pointing had worn me out, and I had had enough. My mental health was beginning to suffer as a result of my dad's continual arguments with me, so I finally told him that I could no longer bear his presence. I requested that he get his belongings and vacate by the next day. I took the painful decision, but in order to preserve my own tranquility and sanity, I had to set and uphold boundaries. My dad argued that he had nowhere to go and begged for more time, but I was too upset at the time to give a damn about his predicament or his justifications. The following morning, I enforced my choice and forced my dad to vacate. Since DEI won't talk to him, my dad has been contacting me to whine about how I have destroyed his marriage and his life. He claims that a good son would never have ejected their parents and continuously blaming me for DEI's current situation. Update 1. I'm relieved that everyone is aware of the immense trauma my dad has caused me over the years. Many people have suggested that I get in touch with DEI and tell her the truth about my early years because she could not be completely aware of my dad's true identity. I've stayed out in his affairs up until now, but I think it's crucial that she understands the truth because he may have misled her about other matters. I'm going to get in touch with her and speak with her directly. Update 2. A week has passed since my last update. DEI and I finally got a chance to sit down and talk about everything. As it happens, she was unaware of the type of upbringing I experienced. I told her about my emotional trauma, blame, and the effects it had on me. She appeared astonished and acknowledged that Dad had presented a very different image of himself, suggesting that he was a struggling single parent who had given up everything for his child. I was so shocked that I had to shake my head. I told tales of my early years and how I was always held responsible for my mother's death. She conveyed her understanding and concern. I then told her how fortunate I was to get a well-paying career and how hard I had fought to establish myself during college. I was able to move into my own place and save money as a result. I explained to her that I didn't enjoy my father controlling everything around my house because, as a child, he never let me be who I was. DEI recognized my suffering. She then disclosed that Dad had lost all of his money as a result of gambling, and she hadn't told me about it before as he wanted to hide it and was too embarrassed about it. She clarified that she had flatly rejected my dad's initial offer to move in with me. She didn't feel comfortable living with me, so I suppose that's why my dad lied to her and said that he had helped pay for my house, which made her feel less bad about accepting the offer to remain with us. She was upset though, when she subsequently learned from me that his claims of helping with my house were completely false and really another ploy to achieve what he wanted. She went on to express her embarrassment at having to ask me for rent that day. I informed her that Dad was solely responsible for his falsehoods and that it wasn't her fault. DEI told me as we were leaving that she intended to take some time away from Dad to think about their relationship after our talk. Update 3. Hello everyone. I am aware that it has been 3 months since I last made any updates to this page. Since I requested my dad to move out, I have severed all ties with him. Although it hasn't been a simple decision, it is essential for my emotional and mental well-being. He tried to point the finger at me for everything the last time we spoke, but I stopped talking to him. I simply blocked him right away. I must say that I've been feeling a lot better ever since. I feel relieved and more clear-headed now that the pressure and manipulation have subsided. I feel as though my privacy and tranquility have finally returned. Sheila, my girlfriend, has been really helpful during this process. She has supported me, helped me process my feelings, and offered consolation and encouragement. Her assistance has had a significant impact, and I am truly appreciative of her. I'm gradually discovering a new sense of security and contentment now that my dad is no longer involved and Sheila is by my side. I'm concentrating on creating the life I desire, working for my objectives, and appreciating the good things in my relationship. My daughter banned me from her wedding. So I secretly canceled the whole thing I paid for. It's absolutely true that no one can harm you more than your own children. My circumstances are identical. Ava, my 27-year-old daughter, forbade me from going to her wedding. For the past week, I've been drinking and pouting. Her wedding, which I financed, was scheduled for yesterday. Yes, it was a wedding present that I was paying for. Ava was a challenging youngster. When she told me about her wedding preparations, I was relieved that she was finally getting married to someone she loved because I had a lot of nightmares while raising her. I helped since she and her fiancé were struggling financially and couldn't plan a good wedding. What do I receive in exchange? I was not allowed to go. The devastation is beyond words. I added my brother to the guest list by calling the wedding planner a few days ago. The guest list was full, he claimed. To see if we could arrange anything, I requested him to email me the whole guest list. He said that Ava had told him to keep the guest list private. I informed him that since I was her father and the one covering the wedding expenses, they had best follow my instructions. Despite his reluctance, he sent me the list when I threatened to call his boss. My heart sank when I saw that. I wasn't on it with my wife. Since neither my wife's nor my name was listed, I called the wedding coordinator once more and insisted there must have been an error. He clarified that he had been expressly instructed not to mention our names. Until he shared the email exchange between him and Ava, I couldn't believe it. They were told to prevent us from entering the venue, which made the situation worse. How devastating must that have been? Although I was aware of my daughter's animosity toward me, I never would have guessed that it would reach a level where she would not let me attend her wedding. She was at her bachelorette party that day, so when I frantically called her, her phone was on voicemail. She didn't call that day or the following, despite my message requesting her to do so. I arrived at her flat, where she and her fiancé were residing, on the third day, right before the wedding. She said that she was too busy getting ready for her wedding to meet with me. She was avoiding me since, by that point, the wedding planner had informed her that I was aware of the guest list. I went there to ask her a question, but her demeanor simply made me more irate. I informed her that I was aware that she had prevented me from going to the wedding. "Well, good for you," was her response. "Traveling to the location saved you time and effort. If I have time, I will forward the wedding photos." I went utterly insane. This was all there was, no explanation, no regret, no apology. Her cruelty made me cry. Tears filled my eyes as I questioned what I had done wrong to merit this. She said that I had always mistreated her, first by slapping a stepmother in her face and then by siding with other people. Even when she was at fault, she wanted me to stand up for her without reservation. When she harassed my sister's daughter, how could I stand up for her? When she was discovered using pills in class, I did defend her and prevented her from getting expelled. I helped her get into college. But she decided to remain unappreciative in spite of everything I accomplished. She accused me of generating negativity in her home when she noticed me crying. I reminded her that her wedding was being paid for by me. She became hostile and claimed that I owed her this and that I wasn't doing her any favors. I went crazy and told her that I owed her nothing. This wedding was a favor and I had done more than enough. She said she didn't have time for my emotional drama and asked me to go. When I got home, I sobbed uncontrollably in front of my wife, Mercy, who is Ava's stepmother. Mercy is a good-hearted and forgiving lady, yet she became enraged for the first time when she witnessed me cry. She urged me to do something about Ava. "We must stop Ava from feeling entitled to harm us," she continued. Up until a year ago, when she eventually found a respectable job, Ava had been surviving off of my money. She didn't have any money saved for her wedding because of this. I'd had enough. I made the decision to discipline her. I called off all of the wedding plans. I didn't care that I hardly received any money back from the advance payments. I wanted to cancel the wedding planner as well as the wedding location, but I knew that would notify Ava, who could then make other arrangements. I intended to spoil her special day. I allowed her to keep her dress since she already had it. All of this made me feel bad, but after giving it some thought, I knew I had done more than enough for her. Why should I feel bad about interrupting her wedding if she didn't? When the wedding coordinator and the caterers and decorators showed up at the location on the wedding day, they were turned away. When the security showed them the cancellation email, it sparked a flurry of activity. When the wedding planner called to ask for the last payment, I informed them that I was no longer concerned and that they could speak with Ava about it. They informed me that when the venue guards denied Ava access, she got into a fight with them. Her fiancé saved her just in time after she nearly got arrested for trespassing. I had blocked her number when she attempted to contact me. I had denied her entry to the main gate when she arrived at my property. I desired tranquility, but I wasn't scared of her. Talking was pointless since, like she did when I visited her home, her comments would just make me feel worse. She needed to take responsibility for her conduct. She could no longer be repeatedly forgiven as a child. Ava just wanted her friends to attend her wedding, not family. I honored her decision. Fortunately, she had to deal with her friends about the wedding cancellation, so I didn't have to tell them. My parents were the only ones who weren't thrilled with what I accomplished. They said that regardless of how terrible our kids are to us, we should never treat them cruelly. I informed them that Ava was the cause of this. All her life, she had been cruel and egotistical. No matter how hard I try to defend what I did, the guilt still remains. I pretend to be brave, but I secretly regret calling off my own daughter's wedding. My heart has been relieved by writing this down, even if I have no idea why I'm here. Update 1. I appreciate all of your moral support. I didn't think my acts would be praised by others. I was afraid I would be considered a fool for taking such a harsh stance against my own daughter. A few of you inquired as to Ava's history of animosity toward us. I apologize for missing that previously. Here are the specifics. I had no idea how this format operated. My second wife is Mercy, a 45-year-old woman. My kid from my first marriage is named Ava. When Ava was 7 years old, I divorced her mother, my first wife. Ava's mother left me for him after finding someone else. I was granted custody of Ava because they were leaving for Europe and didn't want her. When Ava was 13, I remarried Mercy, and ever since, Mercy and I have had to deal with Ava's anger. Mercy is the object of her intense hatred. When she was a teenager, it made sense. It must have been difficult to watch someone take her mother's place. Mercy, a certified children's counselor and teacher, reassured me that Ava would be all right as an adult. She thought Ava would view me as more than simply her father. She would see me as a person in need of a companion. 5 years after the divorce, I got married in the hopes that Ava would value the fact that I had raised her by myself over those 5 years. Ava was disliked by both her mother and her new spouse. Regretfully, Ava showed absolutely no gratitude. Rather, Ava became increasingly hostile toward Mercy and me. In the hopes that Ava would find friendship there, I had to send her to live with my sister, who had a daughter of the same age, because things had gotten so horrible. After a few months of smooth sailing, my sister gave up less than a year later. Since it was their last year of school, my sister didn't want her daughter's grades to suffer as a result of the petty arguments that Ava and her daughter had, she informed me. I had to return Ava as a result. Ava lived with us until she graduated from high school, although she would spend her breaks with my parents. She eventually declared that she would complete her high school education while residing with them and refused to return home. I made arrangements for carpooling because my parents' residence was far from her school. As long as she was content and peaceful, that arrangement lasted. But her high school grades were terrible when they were released. At that point, I discovered that she had joined the wrong crowd, students who were doing drugs. She wanted to live with my parents because she had a nasty boyfriend. After they went to bed, she would slip out and tour the city until after midnight. Her senior year of high school had to be repeated. Another nightmare was getting her through college. She wouldn't have been accepted any place else due to her bad grades and depressing attitude, so thank God I had some contacts who helped her get a spot at a respectable college. She once again surrounded herself with the wrong crowd and used drugs while she was a college student. She had to go to rehab because things got so out of hand. She finally graduated at age 25, but she had a relapse the year after, so I had to send her back to treatment for a few months. She truly has been a pain in the butt, so calling her such wouldn't be impolite. She has continuously caused me distress, embarrassment, and misery. I'm so grateful for Mercy, my understanding wife. She could have talked me out of leaving Ava if she had been any other lady, but instead she was the one who continually urged me to wait. Mercy has given so much of herself for Ava and me, and I'm so grateful for it. The fact that I got married again, and Mercy even more so, seems to be Ava's biggest grievance. Mercy isn't Native American, you see. The Middle East was the birthplace of her family. Her parents, who were immigrants in the United States, were unable to support their 5 children, so she grew up in an NGO. They came to the United States with nothing after fleeing a war-torn area. I was drawn to Mercy for that reason. Despite having a difficult upbringing and little money, she persevered, obtained a master's degree, found a lucrative teaching position, and established a successful life for herself. Despite being a self-made woman, Ava refers to her as a gold digger. Yes, we have some generational riches because my family has had a successful export company for 2 generations. Since this is my second marriage and her first, Ava thinks Mercy married me for financial gain. Ava argues that if it weren't for financial gain, Mercy wouldn't have married a single father who was 12 years her senior. Mercy is 45 and I'm 57. I don't know who gave Ava these thoughts, but that's why she called Mercy a gold digger. A few of you also inquired as to whether Ava's mother had anything to do with this. In actuality, she hasn't gotten in touch with either Ava or myself since our divorce. All I know is that she was in Germany when I last heard from her. Regarding the present circumstance, Ava attempted to vent her rage by contacting me after I called off her wedding, but I prohibited her from doing so on any platform. When I called off the wedding, my parents were upset and offered to cover the costs if Ava wanted to reschedule. However, Ava betrayed them, saying they were supporting me. Using harsh language, she even threw them out of her house and told them not to come again. Although her teacher, who also happened to attend the same gym as me, was the one who discovered her high school substance use, she blames them for it. Following this, my parents had a change of heart and accepted my decision to call off the wedding. I can't give Ava the right to take advantage of and harm us whatever she pleases. I still haven't heard from her, so I have no idea what she's up to. 10 days after her alleged wedding day, my parents paid her a visit 2 days ago. They are still not married. They're probably arranging a new date or simply haven't followed through. Oh, and I blocked the credit card I was using to make the purchase. She still had access to it, but she hadn't used it much since landing her job. She will probably be upset by this, but I don't care anymore. I don't feel guilty now that I know how she treated my parents. They have always cherished and protected her, and they are in their late 70s. It was right to cut Ava off. Update 2. Hello everyone. Although it has been more than a year since I last updated this topic, I have remained in close contact with all of the people who PM'd me or left comments on the post. A few weeks later, I learned that Ava had married her fiancé in a secret ceremony attended only by their closest friends. I wished her luck in life and was pleased for her. I had no social media connection to her, so I had no idea what was going on in her life. My niece informed me that Ava had changed her Facebook status to reflect her and her husband's move to a nearby city. Before I received a call from an unknown number a week ago, everything in my life was going according to plan. It was Matt, Ava's husband. I was anxious, fearing that she might have suffered some sort of mishap. She wanted to meet me in person, which surprised me, but he reassured me that she was okay. He claimed he would explain when we met when I asked why. He proposed getting together for supper and said he was in town. In my heart, I hoped that this would be an opportunity to make amends with Ava. I believed that Matt was serving as a go-between and that she might be too embarrassed to approach me. I went to see him with great expectations, but to my disappointment, Matt arrived by himself. He said he had no idea where Ava was when I inquired about her. With a sinking heart, I inquired as to her whereabouts. Then he disclosed that they were no longer together. According to Matt, Ava had a history of abuse during their marriage and had a serious problem with anger management. Even over small disagreements, she would hurl objects and smash household objects. For as long as he could, he put up with it, but eventually it got to be too much, and they split up. Matt continued by saying that Ava had psychological problems and attributed any problems she encountered to other people. Because they had relocated to a new city for his work, she and he had many arguments. Ava was angry at him for removing her from her hometown, even though she had secured a comparable well-paying position there. That was only one of their numerous problems. Matt stated he wanted to apologize face-to-face. He acknowledged that he had seen Ava treat me, Mercy, and my parents cruelly, but he chose not to step in since Ava had used him against us all. He felt bad for ignoring the warning signs and causing himself suffering. I informed him that Ava was to blame and that he was not. I held myself partially responsible for not raising her well. I also expressed my regret to him for what he had endured with Ava. Then Matt asked me to do him a favor. He claimed that Ava was pleading with him to take her back since she had been upset by the breakup. But after experiencing her mistreatment, he had lost interest in her. He nevertheless sent her warm wishes and asked if I could help her during this trying period. Because of her rage, Ava had lost all of her true friends and Matt felt I could help her by taking her to therapy. I informed him that although I hoped I could, Ava would not allow me to be close to her. He got it, and we both said we wanted to help Ava if she would let us. I made the decision to go see Ava after that talk. Unfortunately, things didn't work out as planned. She attacked Mercy and me, but I had come by myself so Mercy wouldn't see Ava's anger. In an attempt to soothe her, I apologized. Right or wrong didn't matter to me at the time. I just wanted to assist her. I advised her to see a therapist first, but otherwise, she could say anything she wanted about me. Ava brought up the past without listening. She screamed that she wanted to kill Mercy because she detested her so much. She acknowledged that she was embarrassed by our marriage and embarrassed to introduce Mercy as her stepmother, which is why she had barred us from attending her wedding. She threw me out of the house when I tried to talk sense into her, accusing me of being the cause of all her issues. To be honest, I don't care anymore, and I'm not sure if I was correct or not. I don't know how to help her, but all I want is for her to recover. Update 3. I appreciate all of your moral support. When I created the last update, I was pretty upset, and this place has truly helped me relax. Mercy advised me to get in touch with Ava's school closest buddy. We knew each other well because her family lived next door. I messaged her on social media to explain the situation because she now resides in South Africa. Since she was the only person Ava had never battled with, I requested her to get in touch with Ava in the hopes that she could get through to her. Her buddy promised to assist, and happily she did. Ava committed to therapy, and I think it's going well because she came to see my parents a week ago and expressed regret for her actions. She acknowledged that she was no longer able to contain her hatred because it had become so strong. She still holds me responsible for everything though, and stated that she would never forgive me. I no longer harbor any animosity toward her. Even though I'm not involved, I simply hope she has a happy life. I appreciate your support, everyone. I sincerely hope that no father ever has to deal with their own child's intense hatred. I sincerely appreciate you staying until the very end. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe if you truly enjoy our videos. Enjoy your wonderful day.